The glass slipped from the maid's trembling fingers and plummeted toward the marble floor. It was a silent accident, the kind that happens in a split second. But what happened next froze time itself. Before the crystal tumbler could shatter into 1,000 dangerous shards, a small hand shot out with lightning speed and caught it inches from the ground. It was a reflex of perfect precision. The maid gasped, her eyes locking onto the young girl sitting in the armchair. The girl was supposed to be completely blind. For a terrifying second, their eyes met clear, focused, and terrified. Then, the girl's gaze went blank again, glazing over into a milky, unseeing stare. But it was too late. The secret was out, and in a house built on grief and lies, this discovery was about to change everything. The Sterling estate sat upon a high hill like a stone sentinel overlooking the valley. It was a place of breathtaking architecture and manicured gardens, yet the locals always drove past it with a sense of hushed reverence and pity. To the outside world, it was a mansion. To Arthur Sterling, it was a mausoleum. Since the passing of his wife, Isabella, 3 years ago, the house had lost its warmth. The grand windows were often draped in heavy velvet, keeping the sunlight at bay, and the air inside was always chilled, conditioned to a sterile temperature that felt more like a hospital than a home. Arthur was a man who had conquered the business world. He could predict market crashes and navigate complex mergers with his eyes closed, yet he was utterly helpless within the walls of his own home. He was a tall man with broad shoulders that had begun to slump under the invisible weight of sorrow. His life revolved around one singular fragile axis, which was his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was the tragedy that kept Arthur awake at night. Following the car accident that had claimed Isabella, Lily had retreated into a world of darkness. The doctors had called it hysterical blindness, a physical manifestation of severe psychological trauma. But as months turned into years, the diagnosis shifted to permanent cortical blindness. Arthur had spent millions flying in specialists from Switzerland, Japan, and Germany. They all offered the same sympathetic nods and prescribed the same coping mechanisms. Arthur accepted his duty as the protector of a broken child. He paved her world with soft edges and cushioned floors, ensuring she would never face a single bump or bruise. Into this silent, suffocating world walked Elena. She was not the first maid Arthur had hired, nor was she the most qualified on paper. The agency had sent over resumes of women with degrees in child psychology and nursing, women who wore starched uniforms and spoke in hushed, clinical tones. Elena was different. She was in her late 40s, with hands roughened by years of honest work and a face that etched a map of her own hardships. She wore her hair in a practical bun and possessed a warmth that seemed to radiate from her very skin. She needed this job. Her husband's medical bills were piling up, and the salary Arthur Sterling offered was a lifeline she could not ignore. The interview had been brief. Arthur sat behind a desk that looked large enough to land a plane on. He did not ask her about her cleaning techniques or her cooking. He asked her if she could be quiet. He asked her if she understood that Lily was not to be disturbed, not to be startled, and never, under any circumstances, to be left alone in a room with an open window or a sharp object. Elena had nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy for the man who looked more like a ghost than a tycoon. On her first day, the house felt oppressive. The silence was heavy, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. The butler, a stiff man named Henderson, gave her the tour. He pointed out the padded corners on the tables and the tactile strips on the floor that guided Lily from her bedroom to the dining hall. Everything was engineered for safety, yet it felt stripped of life. There were no toys on the floor, no music playing, and no laughter. Elena met Lily in the library. The girl was sitting in a large leather wingback chair, looking small and porcelain-like. She was beautiful, with long dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders, and pale skin that spoke of two Many days spent indoors. Her eyes were open, staring fixedly at a point on the wall. They were a striking shade of green, but they held that distinct, vacant quality Elena had seen in the blind before. Arthur stood by the window, watching his daughter with an expression of agonizing love. He introduced Elena softly. He told Lily that Elena was there to help her, to be her eyes when he could not be there. Lily did not turn her head. She gave a small, practiced nod and whispered a hello that barely carried across the room. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. It was not fear, but a sense of profound wrongness. It felt as though the girl was not just blind, but absent, as if her spirit had vacated the building long ago. Elena's duties were simple. She was to clean, to prepare light meals for Lily, and to guide her around the house and garden. But as the first week passed, Elena found herself doing more watching than working. She watched how the household revolved around Lily's disability. Henderson would announce his presence 3 steps before entering a room. Arthur would cut Lily's food into tiny, bite-sized pieces, feeding her sometimes as if she were a toddler rather than a 10-year-old. They spoke about her in front of her as if she wasn't there, discussing her appointments and her medication. Through it all, Lily sat like a statue. She accepted the care, the coddling, and the pity with a stoic resignation. But Elena, who had raised 3 rambunctious boys and had spent her life observing people, felt a nagging instinct in her gut. She watched Lily's hands. They were steady. She watched Lily's posture. It was alert. There was a tension in the girl that didn't match the helpless persona she projected. It was just a feeling, a whisper of intuition, but Elena couldn't shake it. She looked at the grieving father and the broken daughter, and she wondered if the darkness in this house was more than just a lack of sight. She wondered if everyone was seeing what they wanted to see, rather than what was actually there. The second week brought a subtle shift in the atmosphere, though only Elena seemed to notice it. She had settled into the rhythm of the Sterling household, a rhythm that was slow, methodical, and suffocating. Every morning began the same way. Arthur would carry Lily down the grand staircase, despite the fact that she was perfectly capable of walking with a cane. He would place her at the dining table, kiss her forehead, and promise to return early from the office. Once he left, the house would exhale, settling into a deep, dusty silence. Elena made it her mission to bring some semblance of normalcy to Lily's day. She tried to engage the girl in conversation, talking about the weather, the birds outside, or the stories from her own childhood. Lily would answer in monosyllables. Yes, no, thank you. She was polite, terrifyingly so, but she offered no bridge to her inner world. She sat in the library for hours, listening to audiobooks with headphones on, her face an unreadable mask. However, Elena was a woman who noticed the details others ignored. She began to see cracks in the performance, tiny inconsistencies that didn't align with total blindness. One Tuesday afternoon, Elena was dusting the high shelves in the library while Lily listened to a story. Elena accidentally knocked a heavy book off the edge. It fell with a loud thud. Most people would jump or turn their head toward the sound. Lily did neither. She remained perfectly still, not even a twitch of her eyebrow. It was unnatural. Even a blind person would react to a sudden noise. It was as if Lily was trying too hard to appear unaffected. Later that same week, they were in the garden. It was the only place Lily seemed to relax. The scent of blooming jasmine and roses filled the air. Arthur had designed the garden specifically for her, with fragrant herbs and textured plants she could touch. Elena walked a few paces behind, allowing the girl some independence. The path was paved with smooth stones, but there was a section where a tree root had recently uplifted a paver, creating a significant tripping hazard. Elena opened her mouth to warn her, but before she could speak, she watched Lily sidestep the root. It wasn't a stumble or a lucky guess. Lily's foot deviated from the straight path, stepped around the obstacle, and continued. Elena froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked up at the windows of the house, wondering if Arthur was watching, but the curtains were drawn. She looked back at Lily, who was now running her hand over a lavender bush, her face tilted up to the sun. It was impossible. The doctors, the specialists, the years of diagnosis, how could they all be wrong? Or was Elena imagining things? Perhaps the girl had memorized the path. Perhaps she knew every stone and every crack by heart. Elena decided to test the boundaries, gently and carefully. During lunch, she placed a glass of water slightly to the left of where she usually put it. A blind person would reach out, sweeping the air until they made contact. Lily reached out in a direct, straight line, her hand hovering for a microsecond to correct the angle, before grasping the glass firmly. It was subtle. To anyone else, it looked like muscle memory. To Elena, it looked like hand-eye coordination. The tension in the house began to rise, not because of arguments, but because of the secret Elena felt she was carrying. She watched Arthur come home every evening, his face gray with exhaustion, and instantly soften when he saw his daughter. He would kneel by her chair, holding her hand, telling her about the world she couldn't see. He described the sunset, the color of the leaves, the look of the city skyline. He poured his heart out to her, believing she was trapped in the dark. It was his penance, his way of staying connected to the tragedy that defined them. Elena realized that Lily's blindness was the glue holding Arthur together. It gave him a purpose. If Lily wasn't blind, what did that make Arthur? A man who had wasted years grieving? A father who didn't know his own child. The implications were terrifying. Elena knew she was just the maid. She had no authority, no medical degree, and no right to challenge the reality of a powerful man like Arthur Sterling. One wrong word, and she would be out on the street, her family's financial security destroyed. Yet, she couldn't ignore the way Lily moved when she thought no one was looking. One afternoon, Elena walked into the drawing room softly, her rubber-soled shoes making no sound on the carpet. Lily was standing by the window. A butterfly had flown in through a crack in the patio door. It was a large yellow swallowtail, fluttering against the glass. Lily wasn't staring into the void. Her head was moving. She was tracking the butterfly. Her eyes darted up and down, following the erratic flight path. She raised a hand, her fingers dancing in the air, mimicking the butterfly's wings. Elena stopped breathing. She stood in the doorway, paralyzed by the beauty and the horror of the moment. Lily could see. She could see the butterfly, the sun, the room. She could see everything. And for some reason that Elena couldn't fathom, she was choosing to live in the dark. The moment lasted only 10 seconds before the butterfly found its way out. Lily lowered her hand and returned to her chair, instantly slumping back into the posture of the invalid. Elena backed away slowly, retreating into the hallway, her mind racing. This wasn't just a medical miracle. It was a deception of massive proportions. The incident with the glass tumbler the next morning was the final confirmation. Elena had dropped it, and Lily had caught it. The look of terror in the girl's eyes had been unmistakable. It wasn't the fear of the noise. It was the fear of being found out. After the glass was placed safely on the table, a heavy silence descended on the room. Elena didn't sweep up the non-existent shards. She simply stood there, wiping her hands on her apron, looking at the 10-year-old girl who was trembling in the armchair. Elena walked over and knelt down in front of Lily. She didn't speak with the deference of a servant, but with the authority of a mother. She reached out and gently took Lily's hands. They were cold and clammy. "Lily, look at me," Elena said. Her voice was steady, stripping away the pretense. "I can't," Lily whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm blind." "Drop the act, child," Elena said, not unkindly, but firmly. "I saw you catch the glass. I saw you watching the butterfly. I saw you step over the tree root. You can see me right now." Lily squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking out from the corners. She began to hyperventilate, pulling her hands away to cover her face. "Please don't tell him," she sobbed. "Please, Elena, you can't tell him. He'll hate me. He'll send me away." Elena sat back on her heels, stunned. "Why?" she asked, her voice softening. "Why would you pretend? Your father loves you more than anything. He would be overjoyed. He spent a fortune trying to cure you." Lily shook her head violently, her hair flying around her face. "No, he wouldn't. You don't understand. After Mom died, he stopped seeing me. He was so sad. He was always working or locked in his study. He couldn't look at me because I look like her. But when the doctors said I was blind, when I stopped looking at him, he came back." The confession hung in the air, heavy and heartbreaking. Elena felt her heart break for this confused, lonely child. It was a twisted logic born of trauma. Lily believed that her father's love was conditional on her brokenness. She thought that if she were whole, she would be a reminder of the wife he lost. But if she were damaged, she became the daughter he needed to save. "He sits with me for hours," Lily cried softly. "He reads to me. He holds my hand. If I can see, he'll go back to being busy. He'll go back to being sad. I just wanted him to stay." Elena reached out and pulled the crying girl into an embrace. She realized now that the deception wasn't malicious. It was a desperate survival mechanism. Lily had sacrificed her sight to buy her father's affection. She had been living a lie for 3 years, suppressing her natural instincts, living in a blurry world of her own making, just to keep her father from drifting away into his grief. "But you can't keep this up, Lily," Elena whispered, stroking the girl's hair. "You are growing up. You're missing the world. And your father, he is suffering too. He blames himself. He thinks he failed you." "I can't tell him," Lily insisted, pulling back. "He'll never forgive me. He'll think I'm a monster for lying to him." Elena knew she was in a terrible position. If she told Arthur, she risked destroying the fragile trust between father and daughter. Arthur might react with anger. He might feel betrayed. But if she said nothing, she was complicit in the lie that was stunting Lily's life. The girl was a prisoner in her own home, trapped by a performance that had gone on far too long. The situation came to a head sooner than Elena expected. That evening, Arthur came home with a manic energy. He called Henderson and Elena into the study. He was pacing back and forth, holding a thick file of papers. "I've found it," Arthur announced, his eyes bright with a desperate hope. "I've been on the phone with a specialist in Zurich. They have a new experimental procedure for cortical blindness. It involves intensive neurological stimulation. It's risky, and it requires a 6-month residency at their facility in Switzerland." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Arthur's hopeful expression. He was ready to ship his daughter to a foreign country, to subject her to unnecessary medical procedures, all for a cure she didn't need. "I've booked the flight for next week," Arthur continued. "I'm going with her. We're going to fix this. I promised Isabella I would take care of her, and I'm going to fix this." Elena looked at the door where Lily was listening from the hallway. She saw the girl's shadow trembling. This had gone too far. The lie was about to result in real, physical and emotional harm. Switzerland, isolation, doctors, poking and prodding a healthy brain. "Mr. Sterling," Elena said, her voice cutting through Arthur's excitement, "you cannot take her to Switzerland." Arthur stopped pacing and looked at the maid, confused by her tone. "Excuse me? This is the best clinic in the world, Elena. Money is no object." "It's not about the money, sir," Elena said, stepping forward. "She isn't sick. She doesn't need a doctor." Arthur's face hardened. He didn't like being challenged, especially not about his daughter's health. "You don't know what you're talking about. The doctors said The doctors are treating a ghost, Elena interrupted, her heart pounding. Sir, you need to listen to me. Lily isn't blind. The silence in the study was absolute. Arthur stared at Elena as if she had spoken in a foreign language. His expression shifted from confusion to a cold, simmering anger. He walked slowly around the desk, his hands balling into fists at his sides. How dare you, he whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. How dare you make light of my daughter's condition? You have been here for 2 weeks. You think you know better than the top neurologists in the world? You think this is some kind of game? It is not a game, sir, Elena said, holding her ground despite her shaking knees. It is a tragedy, but not the one you think. Get out, Arthur snapped, pointing to the door. Pack your things. You are fired. I want you out of this house in 10 minutes. Arthur turned his back on her, dismissing her, reaching for the phone to call security. But Elena didn't move. She knew this was the moment that would define the rest of their lives. She couldn't leave Lily to face this alone. Call her in, Elena said loudly. Call her in and throw a ball at her face. Throw a book. Do something unpredictable. If I am wrong, I will leave and you can sue me for everything I have. But if I am right, you save your daughter from a surgery she doesn't need. Arthur froze. He turned back slowly, looking at the conviction in Elena's eyes. He saw no malice there, only a desperate plea for truth. The certainty in her voice planted a seed of doubt in his mind. He hesitated, then walked to the door and opened it. Lily? He called out. Lily appeared from the shadows of the hallway. She looked small, terrified, her eyes fixed on the floor. She had heard everything. She walked into the study, tapping her cane, playing the part because she didn't know how to stop. Arthur looked at his daughter. He looked at her eyes, which seemed so vacant. He looked back at Elena, who nodded urgingly. Arthur felt a wave of nausea. He didn't want to do this. He felt cruel, even thinking about it. But the maid's words were gnawing at him. Arthur walked over to his desk and picked up a heavy paperweight. It was a glass sphere. He weighed it in his hand. He couldn't throw this at her. It could hurt her. He put it down and picked up a soft plush cushion from the sofa. It was harmless. He stood 10 feet away from Lily. She was standing still, waiting for him to speak. Arthur took a deep breath. He wound up his arm. He felt ridiculous. He felt like a monster. Lily, he said softly. Then, without warning, he tossed the cushion. He threw it directly at her face. It happened in slow motion. The cushion sailed through the air. If Lily were blind, it would have hit her square in the nose. She would have flinched only after the impact. But she didn't. Her reflexes took over. Before the cushion could make contact, she ducked. It was a sharp, athletic movement. She dipped her head and raised her arm to deflect it. The cushion brushed her elbow and fell harmlessly to the floor. Arthur stood frozen, his arms still extended. The room seemed to spin around him. He watched his daughter straighten up, her face crumbling into a mask of guilt and terror. She didn't look at the wall anymore. She looked directly at him. Her eyes were focused. They were filled with tears, and they were looking right into his soul. You can see, Arthur whispered. The words came out as a strangled croak. Lily burst into tears. She dropped her cane and fell to her knees, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. Arthur staggered back, bracing himself against the desk. His world was collapsing and reassembling itself in the same instant. The relief was overwhelming. She was whole. She was healthy, but it was immediately followed by a crushing sense of betrayal. 3 years. 3 years of doctors, of despair, of holding her hand in the dark. Why? Arthur asked, his voice cracking. Why, Lily? Lily looked up, her face wet with tears. Because you came back, she choked out. When Mom died, you went away. You were here, but you weren't here. You didn't look at me. But when I got sick, you held me. You stayed with me. I didn't want you to leave again." Arthur felt as though he had been punched in the gut. He looked at Alina, who was standing quietly in the corner, tears in her own eyes. He looked back at his daughter. The realization washed over him like a tidal wave. He had been so consumed by his own grief, so wrapped up in his own pain, that he had abandoned his daughter emotionally. She hadn't faked blindness to hurt him. She had done it to survive him. She had disabled herself to fit into the only space he had made for her, the space of a victim needing protection. Arthur fell to his knees on the carpet. He didn't care about his suit or his dignity. He crawled over to his daughter and wrapped his arms around her. He pulled her against his chest, burying his face in her hair. He wept. He wept for the years they had lost, for the pain he had caused, and for the miracle that she was actually okay. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, rocking her back and forth. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I see you. I really see you." The days that followed the revelation were not easy. The truth, once out, required a new foundation to be built. It wasn't a magical fix where everything instantly returned to normal. There was awkwardness. Lily had to relearn how to be a seeing child in a house designed for the blind. She had to learn to look her father in the eye without fear of him looking away. Arthur had to learn to parent a vibrant, active 10-year-old rather than a fragile doll. Alina stayed. Arthur had apologized profusely for trying to fire her, offering her a raise and a permanent contract. He realized that without her sharp eyes and her brave heart, he might have lost his daughter to a lie forever. Alina became more than a maid. She became the bridge between the two of them. She encouraged Arthur to take down the heavy drapes and let the sunlight flood back into the mansion. She encouraged Lily to run in the garden, to paint, to read books with her eyes instead of her ears. One afternoon, a month later, the transformation was complete. The Sterling estate no longer looked like a mausoleum. The windows were open, and the sound of piano music drifted out onto the lawn. It wasn't a sad, melancholic tune, but a bright, energetic melody. Lily was playing. She was reading the sheet music, her fingers flying over the keys with a dexterity that she had hidden for so long. Arthur sat on the patio, watching her through the open doors. He looked different. The slump in his shoulders was gone. He was working less, spending his afternoons at home. He was learning to know his daughter not as a patient, but as a person. He watched her with a look of wonder, savoring every movement, every glance. Alina walked out with a tray of lemonade. She set it down on the table next to him. "She plays beautifully," Alina said, smiling. "She does," Arthur agreed. He looked up at Alina. "You know, I thought I was the one taking care of her. I thought I was the strong one. But I was the one who was blind. I was blind to her pain. I was blind to my own neglect." "We all have our blind spots, Mr. Sterling," Alina said gently. "Sometimes we just need someone to help us adjust the focus." Arthur nodded. He looked back at Lily. She stopped playing and turned around on the piano bench. She saw her father sitting there, and she smiled a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. She waved at him. Arthur waved back. It was such a simple gesture, a wave. But for 3 years, it had been impossible. Now it was the most beautiful thing Arthur had ever seen. The house on the hill was no longer a place of pity. It was a home again. The lie that had started in darkness had been brought into the light, and in the burning away of the deception, they had found something much more durable, the truth. It turned out that the greatest vision didn't come from the eyes, but from the willingness to truly see the ones we love, flaws, fears, and all. What a powerful reminder that sometimes the things we see with our eyes are the least important truths of all. Lily's blindness was a mirror reflecting her father's grief, a desperate cry for connection in a lonely world. It took Alina, a stranger with a compassionate heart, to look past the surface and see the reality that everyone else missed. It teaches us that love isn't just about protecting someone. It's about being present, truly present, so they don't have to break themselves just to keep us near. If you enjoyed this story of redemption and family, please give this video a like and subscribe for more emotional journeys. Remember to check on your loved ones today, really see them. Until next time.